Imagine this. You're 25 years old. There's a war for independence raging. The army you serve is outmanned, undergunned, and on the verge of collapse. You've been given an assignment. Travel to a remote fort in New York and retrieve 120,000 pounds of cannons and artillery and bring them back to Boston for General George Washington's use in his fight against the British. You're not a trained general. You don't have any engineering studies. In fact, at 12 years old, you stopped formal education. But yet you've got zeal and you've got a thirst for knowledge. You're what they call an autodidact. You ran a bookstore for most of your teens and adult life and learned as much as you could about military and engineering, and you want to bring to bear all of that learned knowledge on this task. So you travel to Fort Ticonderoga and you work with farmers and other patriots in the area to figure out a system for moving those cannons and that artillery down Lake George and the Hudson River and then across the Berkshire Mountains. That was the challenge of Henry Knox in 1775. Most people don't know this story, but everyone should. Because it's not just about Henry Knox. It's about ordinary people rising to extraordinary challenges. It's about resilience, vision, and the power of belief. It's about a moment in time, 250 years ago, when a group of rebels decided they weren't going to wait for someone else to change the world. They were going to do it themselves. As we approach the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, stories like these remind us of what's possible when courage meets action. This is history worth celebrating. This is history worth remembering. This is the story of Henry Knox. And this could be the story of your life and mine. You see, the notion of courage meeting action is just as relevant today as it was 250 years ago. I'm a proud member of 3 service organizations in my little town. Each has its own mission and vision: the Rotary Club, the Elks, and the Knights of Columbus. But they're unified in the precept that courage meeting action, individuals bringing to bear their talents, will make a difference in their world. I'm proud of the activity in those service organizations, and that gives my life meaning. We hear a lot about young people thinking that they want jobs and experiences over things because they want to have meaning in their life. Well, those old organizations might look stale to a young person, but I encourage you to look again at those organizations as a way to find meaning in your life, a way to make a difference in your community. So do me a favor. You made it this far in the video. Take a second and drop a comment about how you're serving your community today, or how you plan to serve your community in the coming year. So now let's talk about the actual hike today and some of the pictures I want to share with you. Ran into a bit of a problem this morning. The plan was to Uber up to Crown Point, a dozen miles north of Ticonderoga, and start the hike from there. There actually is one marker up there. The Uber people confused me. They said I had a ride confirmed, and then they called me this morning and said there were no drivers available. So I spent a couple of hours trying to find a local taxi to get me up there, and they were unable to break free. So I had to cut off that Crown Point visit. And if you don't know what the 1700s are all about in terms of transportation, you gotta know it's all about water. You move on rivers and lakes. To move through forests is complicated to go any length of time because forests are dense here in the east, and to move over mountains is very difficult, right, with steep hills and cliffs. So the strongholds for the British in 1775 were New York City and Montreal. And again, for context, for those of you that haven't looked at a map recently, Those two cities are one north of the other and connected by the Hudson River, Lake George, Lake Champlain. So they built a series of forts to control the movement of people and material back and forth in that area. And it became critical at the beginning of the Revolutionary War. Now, when I got out to Fort Ticonderoga, it's obvious why they picked that spot. The coastline kind of juts out into the lake, giving a bottleneck, making it really easy to defend against people moving. I made it all the way into the fort where the first marker is at, and that's this picture here. Now that it says, from this fortress went General Henry Knox in the winter of 1775 to deliver to General George Washington at Cambridge, which is Boston, the train of artillery from Fort Ticonderoga used to force the British Army to evacuate Boston. So that was cool. Also at the fort, they've got lots of actual cannons. Next, I want to show you some, photos from the walk. Basically, I'm using country roads, state highways to get from point A to point B, and it's pastoral farmland. It's just beautiful. I spent the day putting layers on and pulling layers off. You can see me here walking with my sweatshirt hanging out of my coat because it was getting too hot to have the sweatshirt on, but still needed the hat on. The next marker was in Ticonderoga. At that point, the wind had picked up. Here's a wind map from an app. It indicates winds of 15 to 20. I swear it was more like a 30-mile-an-hour wind. So at that point, I had everything on and pulled the face covering up. And then from Ticonderoga, the next monument is on the east side of Lake George, 4 or 5 miles south of the town of Ticonderoga. So I hiked down there and took those pictures. It's right at a boat launch. And that was the end of the day. So fun day hiking. Temperatures started about 30, and I think we got over 40 today, but the high winds created some cold. And then here at the end, I'll just throw in, some of the metrics from the hike.